Okay, so let's just take a few. So, again, why, this meditation particularly, as many of us know, Chenrezig embodies this quality compassion, bodhicitta, so even all the great lamas, they do all these different types of meditations, but the whole purpose, the whole Lam Rim, the whole focus is to develop this precious mind of bodhicitta, this mind that embraces all sentient beings with love and compassion, and also has a skill, as is embodied in, we have these 1,000 arms. Chenrezig has an eye in the palm of each hand. Can you imagine being an artist and painting that? It's quite an accomplishment. So anyway, it's, so this is the eye shows that it has also the wisdom and the skillful means, to benefit each and every sentient being. And we know His Holiness embodies this quality, really the fully developed quality of bodhicitta, because there's so many levels that we can also develop of bodhicitta. There's like 10 grounds on the path of becoming a bodhisattva. So, all these contemplations, the precious human life, death and impermanence, refuge, karma, it's all building us up to, on top of having a basic good heart, to develop this awakening mind of bodhicitta, which we're going to find more about as we move through the modules, especially when we get to the module, I think it's like module 11 or something on bodhicitta. So that's always the goal, even thinking about death, the way that we contemplate death, that it's time's definite, that it's definitely going to happen, the time's indefinite, and that, we're going to lose everything, so we have to sort of practice now. That's all so that we get this kind of motivation, this inspiration, this energy to practice bodhicitta. So we always need that. That's the end goal, It's just that these preliminary meditations, moving up, working up to that, allow us to understand more and more what bodhicitta is. And also, especially in the light of death and impermanence, that contemplation, it gives us this energy and focus in life. It causes us to kind of seize the moment and use it as much as we can to awaken our, our potential to develop this bodhicitta. So that's why it's good. I think it's good to start with this practice and remind ourselves of where we want to go, and just always creating this kind of imprint, awakening in the mind and that quality through these meditations. So let's just take a couple of minutes to kind of settle into wherever we're comfortable, our posture for meditation. Main thing is, as we know, keeping the spine, the back straight. So the mind doesn't slouch, get foggy. We don't fall asleep. We try and stay as alert as possible. And, it's the evening, so everybody's a bit more, well, not everybody, but most of us tend to be more sluggish in the evening. So if you want to do the 9-round breathing, you can start with that. And then in that space, taking a few minutes just to be with the breath. Now, we can either just be with the breath normally, you know, as we breathe normally, or just to kind of ignite a little bit our bodhicitta, we can think about the four immeasurables, allow them to ride on the breath. You know, as we inhale, may I be happy. As we exhale, may all beings be happy. As we inhale, or you can only think that, or as I inhale, may I be free of suffering. May all beings be free of suffering. Use the four immeasurables to, you know, ride in with the inhalation and the exhalation. You know, that thought. It's not quite like Tonlen, but it's almost like a preliminary for Tonlen, you know, just nourishing our mind with compassion and happiness for ourselves, and then wishing that for all sentient beings. You know, that's like aspiring bodhicitta. So again, a few minutes just with the breath or with that kind of bringing up the thought of bodhicitta, allowing it to ride on the breath, the thought of the four immeasurables, which is the basis of developing bodhicitta, that mindset. Okay. So just like the softness of the breath, you know, inhaling and exhaling, going in and out through the nostrils. Imagine this soft, open space, just opening up in the space before us, like the vast sky. But there's this real softness to it, you know, clarity. And almost like a rainbow appearing. The rainbow body of Chenrezig just spontaneously manifests in the space before us, seated on a beautiful lotus. The lotus signifies this mind of what we call renunciation. It's actually an awakening mind that wakes up to suffering and has this wish and aspiration to free ourselves and all beings with suffering. Top of the lotus is the moon cushion. So the radiance is not just like one moon, but it's like bright like 1,000 moons. And seated on that, as we see in the image, is the Chenrezig, the Buddha compassion, embodying complete compassion for me and all sentient beings equally. Just like the moon shining equally in all sentient beings, the light of Chenrezig's love, kindness, his skill and power to lift us up for suffering embodies me and all sentient beings, embraces each one of us equally. So why we take refuge, you know, is because we recognize the need to rely on a teacher, a being who's liberated themselves for suffering and the causes of suffering, liberated themselves for birth and death and rebirth, karma and delusion. So we need to rely on a master, a being who's achieved a state beyond that, the Buddha, We need to rely on the teachings, the instructions to liberate ourselves from the state we're in. And we need to rely on a community of practitioners who might not be fully developed, but have progressed further than we have, you know. So as we say, we can discuss together, get advice, check in that we're in the right place, you know, these kind of things that the Sangha who are with us now, you know, they can support us in that way. So I feel like that we have to take refuge, just like we take refuge for the rain, we use an umbrella. In that way, we take refuge in the umbrella of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha to protect us from temporary fears and the ultimate fears of existence. And we feel like all sentient beings, whether they recognize or not, we're in this state. We bring them with us. Imagining that all of us, like grains of sand under the ocean, you know, so many billions of sentient beings, innumerable, we all take refuge together in the enlightened quality and aspect of Chenrezig in the space before us. Sangye chodan sogi chognamla chanchu bardu danyi kyapsuchi dagi chinsogi besonangi drola penjir sangye druparsho sangye chodan sogi chognamla chanchu bardu danyi kyapsuchi dagi chinsogi besonangi Drola Penjir Sangye Druparshog. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Let me just touch on the four immeasurables again. How wonderful it would be if I and all sentient beings were to abide in equanimity, free from attachment for some and hatred for others. How wonderful it would be if I and all sentient beings had happiness in the cause of happiness. How wonderful it would be if I and all sentient beings were free from suffering in the cause of suffering. How wonderful it would be if I and all sentient beings were never separated from the bliss of high rebirth and liberation. So again, just taking a moment to allow any of these thoughts, each of them, one of them, just to settle a little bit in our continuum, to plant that seed of either immeasurable equanimity, love, compassion, joy in our mental continuum, in our consciousness. And again, by offering mandala, our own, like it's like the universe in our hands, you know, if we do this mudra, or we just feel that we're offering everything that's enjoyment to ourselves and everything that's enjoyment unowned in the universe. We try and visualize it and offer it all to the heart of Chenrezig. That much we open and give, that much we receive. Osaji bogi joshe medo tramri rablingji nye de gyambadi sangye jindu mete uwaryi drokun namdak jina Chuparshog Yidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamneyadayami. And then requesting, you know, so important. Anything we want in life, we need to ask for, yeah, most of the time. So we request Chenrezig, you know, we want to ripen in our mind our understanding of the Dharma, you know, as much as possible, these different topics on precious human rebirth, death and impermanence. So help my mind to open up and understand that more deeply. So eventually becomes, all these realizations become one with my own consciousness, my own being. Please bless my mind to become Dharma, Dharma to become the path, and the path to be without obstacles, that I may cease all wrong concepts and immediately generate the two precious bodhicittas. We'll chant a few mantras, visualizing the purifying light and inspirational nectar coming from Chenrezig's heart. So from his heart, a fully developed compassion, it comes through our crown, just cleansing us and awakening up within us those qualities, you know, two bodhicittas, which is wisdom realizing emptiness, and this mind that has the power and quality to benefit all beings. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Okay, so give me a moment to share the PowerPoint. And hello again, Urs. You were away for a couple of weeks. I mean, hello, everyone. Melanie, Dave. Hi, everybody. Jeanette. So, let me, sorry, just get this in the right place. Slideshow from current slide. Here we go. Right, here we are. So, just a little recap. So this week we're going to mostly focus on, and I know some of you are familiar with it, but I guess, you know, this practice is all about gaining more and more familiarity, these teachings, you know, we have to listen again and again, you know, just by, there's so much wisdom we can gain just by listening, you know, especially not just one time, but again and again, you know, and then somehow that there's a wisdom we just gain from that alone, you know, there's a wisdom of listening, wisdom we gain through reflection, and wisdom through meditation. So without the wisdom of listening, we're not really able to cultivate the other two, you know, so they're all equally important. They all build on each other. So, yeah, so I know some of you are familiar, but it's, you know, as we know, we have to keep listening, you know, and then the other two, through that wisdom, deepening that wisdom, the other two, reflection and meditation, can become much more easy. So, so last week this was the topic, you know, death, the time of death, contemplating that, how we use that, how we think about that to deepen our understanding, you know, deepen our understanding of what's really going on in our life, you know. So death, we were contemplating two topics. The time of death is indefinite. And so just to recap on that. So it's, you know, as it says here, and I put this slide up last week, but I just found this, I find this quote very potent, you know, because it's like, well, it's true, you know. It's really not certain, you know. We don't think about that on a daily basis, but I think if we woke up in the morning, if I woke up in the morning and just read this quote, you know, it would just have quite a big impact on my mind every day, you know. Never mind all the other quotes and teachings on, you know, time of death is definite, death is definite, the time is indefinite. Just this one alone I find very potent, you know, to remind me, like, I don't know, you know, if when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to look at next life or I'm going to look at tomorrow, because we think we just have this, you know, we have this habit of feeling and thinking that we're you know, tomorrow's going to come, you know, we have as we said, these sort of blind assumptions. that, you know, well, tomorrow we'll do this and that. We talk about things we're going to do this week, next week, on our birthday, at Christmas. I mean, we all do that, you know. But the purpose of these contemplations is to really allow us to kind of not take that for granted, because we don't know. It is a blind assumption, because there's not, we cannot, there's no guarantee. There's no insurance policy that we can take out that says, yeah, we'll insure you so you live next year, you know. It's not there, you know, that's the reality. So these quotes just kind of, you know, sort of hammer that in a little bit into our consciousness to bring us to the point to make, you know, seize the moment of your life, you know. And again, in the light of what we can do with this life, you know, with these freedoms that we have, these opportunities, what we can do every day, every moment, you know, every week and moment is to try as much as we can, you know, nurture this mind, these minds of bodhicitta. And at best, just living a good life, you know, not harming others, as His Holiness says. If we can't benefit others, if we're not able to do deep development of our mind in this life on the spiritual path, at least using these, you know, the wisdom of that we know we're going to die, the wisdom that we don't know when it's going to happen, to motivate us to not harm, to not get angry in situations where we normally would, you know, because these really shine a light on that, you know, what's meaningful and what's meaningless in terms of our own actions, in terms of what we want to really engage in life. So that's the purpose, you know, is especially this one, the time of death is indefinite. It really kind of, it's supposed to bring us to this point to really, you know, as I say, seize the moment, you know, and to wake up to the fact that there's so many causes and conditions that can cause us to pass a lot faster than we just envision or imagine or would like, you know, we would project, you know. It's not to kind of totally freak us out, although that can feel like that a little bit. And it's actually prepare us, because we don't want to be freaked out when something unexpected does happen. Unexpected illness, unexpected accident, you know, all these things that can happen at any, we know, you know, unexpected harm that comes for the elements. Even if it's not a death, it's something very big, some huge change in our life. These meditations and contemplations help us to be prepared, you know, they mature our mind in a way where we're prepared for the unexpected, all the way up to the big one at death, you know, that big passage that we need to take. So again, the other one that we were looking at, you know, the third contemplation is the third root contemplation that we touched on last week as well, is that nothing can help us except our practice, you know. As His Holiness says, what helps us at the time of death is our good heart, you know. What helps us is our good actions. And we'll feel that at the death time. We will feel that when we have anything that happens in our life, you know. Something, you know, something unexpected, some big change, you know. I think even if it's not like, even just knowing that there's, you know, we're under we have some sickness coming up, you know, that can change our life drastically. I think we'll see that these you know, what becomes meaningful in our life, you know. So these this last contemplation particularly is trying to help us to not get attached. This last contemplation, as we go through life, because we don't know the time when we're going to pass. It's completely indefinite. So as we move through our life, enjoy our friends, enjoy our possessions, but watch for attachment, you know. Be careful, because that trickles in really easily, right? I mean, there's many times when we think we might not be attached, but it's tricky, you know. There's a habit, for most of us, a strong habit of attachment to our place, our friends, our family. And so attachment, it's not love and kindness, wishing others happiness, wishing others to be free from suffering. Those types of minds, when they're deep rooted, you know, loving kindness and compassion, they're not tainted as strongly with attachment, you know. So, but still, for us ordinary beings, even though we love our friends and family, we can see there's still some attachment. We don't want to be separated from them, you know. So what we try to do with the contemplation, this last one, is to really try and, especially when we do the death process here, or doing this meditation on imagining you're on your deathbed, you know, that's going to happen. Just like we plan that, you know, when we pass away, we either want to be cremated or we want to, you know, I don't know, but, you know, whatever we want done with our body, yeah, we do plan for that. you know, what our will is, our possessions. We sort of plan that one, but we visualize all that. And then we do it, you know. So this one's a bit like, well, we visualize what's going to happen when we're actually in the death process, what's happening when we're dying, you know. This is what this meditation is. So when we're on the deathbed, visualize that too. That's a bit more scary, but we need to visualize that one too, you know. So what's happening at the death time? Do you really feel like you can go into that process and, you know, be free from whatever you're clinging to, you know, and to do that now, release the attachment now. Because actually, when we don't have attachment, there's much more space for genuine love, genuine kindness, genuine, and especially genuine compassion, when we get to understand more and more what compassion means. So with that contemplation on the only thing that you know, can really benefit us, not external things like, you know, as I say, friends, family, possessions, none of them really help us. What only helps us, what we take with us is our practice. What we take with us is our goodness, our karma, our actions that we accumulated in this life. You know, that's the baggage we take. Now, if it's nice baggage, that's great. But, you know, so we want to take, we're going to take some, no doubt, but we want to take the, you know, we're going to take all of it, but we want mainly to be carrying good stuff, you know. So it's a bit like these meditations, really, it's a great kindness to ourselves, you know, because we want to be happy now. Whatever happiness we experience now, even just temporary happiness, you know, nice house, nice this, that, it's not really, it doesn't come from what we've really created this life. So in the realm of the teachings on karma that we are going to study in the next module, karma and how it functions in our life, what it is and how it functions. So mainly how karma functions, you know, it's like planting a seed. You know, so mostly what it says in the teachings, if you want to know what you're, you know, we don't need to go to a clairvoyant and ask, you know, what was my past life? Was you know, somebody special, or was a king or a beggar or whatever, you know. Everybody was Cleopatra, everybody wanted to be Cleopatra or some great king or some great president. But no, we can just look at, you know, from the teachings on karma, we can deduce ourselves what we did, you know, whatever we're experiencing in this life. And for most of us, definitely we have some challenges and issues, and I might have mentioned this already, but I always, you know, again, we have to contemplate these things again and again. The picture of this life comes from the karma we created in past life, you know. That's from seeds that we created in the past few lifetimes, and imprints and karmas and actions. So what we're experiencing now, predominantly, is even the fact we can get a good job, we can have a nice place to stay. Okay, you know, we've made money, maybe we put effort into making friends, but these seeds, all that, to have the appearances that we have this life, came from past life karma. And for most of us, we did a really good job, yeah. And then, so what are we doing for future lives, you know? That's the question. This is what comes up next, you know, with these contemplations, you know. So the more we think about death, and death also in the light of continuity consciousness. I don't know, I guess this is probably just made up, you know, this. I doubt there is a sign like that, but I quite liked it. Because that's it. That's the next exit for us, you know. And for some of us, it's closer than others. We're definitely all getting older. And most of us are on quite a bit, you know, so it's coming sooner rather than later, for sure, even though we don't know when the time of death is, but it's definitely coming sooner rather than later, I think. So, you know, we want to, you know, with some kindness, with some care for ourselves, we want to take care of our future, because we took care of previous lives. Most of us have pretty good conditions this life, even if we look in the light of our interest in spiritual affairs, spiritual matters, and deeper things, as aspects of spirituality and the Dharma. And then again, we all have generally, I think, causes and conditions in our lives that support our life in a way to be mostly happy and comfortable, you know, even though we may have to work hard and all that, but even the fact that we're able to do that and have a level of comfort comes from the goodness and the karma we created in past life. So actually, when I became, when I was, heard the Lam Rim a few times in the East, because I met the Dharma in India, and so I spent quite a bit of time going over these topics. I was very fortunate when I was young to be able to have time to meditate on them. And I just remember when I thought about death and impermanence and karma, and then I thought, because I wanted to be a nun quite early on in my life, and I thought, well, it didn't come from my parents, didn't come from my upbringing, didn't come from my school friends, didn't even come from my university friends. None of that influenced me in terms of wanting to become a nun. Even going over to India was mostly my own kind of aspiration and wish to do that and to sort of meditate and have and then to be able to meet the Dharma, I realized I mean, I'm not boasting or anything because it was like, gosh, I was like, thank you, past life. I don't know what you did, but you've set me up for this life. So I felt very grateful to my past life for what they had sort of prepared me for this life. Okay, I'm not out of samsara, I'm not enlightened, I'm not a bodhisattva, but I thought, well, I'm a nun. That's a good start. I've met the Dharma, I have some faith in the Dharma, a great interest. I want to try and practice it the rest of this life. And so I feel like, gosh, I need to do at least that for next life, hopefully. So we can look at that as well. It's really good to some of us might already, really rejoice in what we've done. It's such a good practice, what we've done, and then look at the stuff we honestly still need to do, in light of these teachings, in light of creating really good karmas and conditions for our next life. It's like taking care of your child almost for next life. I want to take care of that person. I want that person, it's still a continuity of us, but like they'll be different as well, but it's a continuity of consciousness. So we want to take care of that, we want it to be as positive as possible for ourselves, whoever we are, and also to, as much as possible to be able to be of use in that lifetime, whether we go to a Pure Land, whether we go in the human realm, so it's kind of thinking like that. It's actually very practical and down to earth, and it requires like sort of planning and thinking in that way. How we use our life now to benefit our future lives, for not just for ourselves, but for others. And so, of course, the Lam Rim is the vehicle. It's the vehicle to do that, just training in the Lam Rim is the best we can do for our future lives, creating these imprints, these even tastes of these topics in our mind, leaving these strong seeds in the mind to be attracted to that in future life and want to keep practicing. So next one, yeah, so really it's, you're in the light of death, when we get to the death time, what happens is, I think as we know, our whole life just kind of appears in front of us, I think everyone says that, it just very quickly appears. And as Padmasambhava said, Guru Rinpoche, often he's called, the vision of this life is like last night's dream, and all meaningless actions are like ripples on a lake. So what would we say are meaningless actions? Just to get an idea of what we think would be meaningless actions. Anyone put something in the chat, put their hand up, share something? Nice. See, has anyone got their hand up? Give it a go. Meaningless actions, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, Joe, you're here.
I would like to share some
Yes.
meaningless action, and seeing this picture of the ripple, it reminds me that even though we have the small actions or the thought in this life, it will come like bigger and bigger, maybe in our last life, next life, I mean.
Yes.
It reminds me of karma.
Reminds you of karma. Anyone
Sorry,
else?
I'm a little bit sick, so I'm not very.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ladan. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for sharing. No, I mean,
Thank you.
these are quite powerful images, And Guru Rinpoche was a great yogi who brought the Dharma to Tibet. Some of you know this already. That would be another story.
Yeah, Guru Rinpoche,
But
yeah.
incredible, powerful being, So, and this is kind of what appears to us at the death time, It can do. the thing is, if we do, so meaningless actions, just before anyone else want to share something about what we feel meaningless actions might mean?
Joe?
It's not helpful, but I'm going to have to say it. A
Okay.
meaningless action is changing the clocks twice a year.
Well,
I-
yes, that could feel like not that.
So, good morning,
Well-
everyone. Sorry I'm late.
No, I mean, it's great that you're here. Yeah. You always bring a bit of light and jovialness, so that's great, Joe. Thank you. Anyone else? Stan, you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Yes. For example, buying new clothes that you never know if you ever have a chance to really use, or having a big concern for worldly items. I think material items, I think, would be an example of meaningless actions.
Yeah. I mean, it's mostly things, you know, that are motivated by wanting comfort, reputation, this life, you know, where they come from actions out of attachment. And of course, it's not to beat ourselves up about that. We all still do some of this stuff. There's no question, you know. So the purpose of the Lamb Rim is slowly to transform our mind so that everything becomes meaningful, you know. So, but yeah, meaningless basically means things that don't really benefit. There's many ways you can sort of explain that, you know, they don't really benefit our future lives, you know. So if we, you know, what happens at the time of death, I think if you just live the life with that kind of sense of wanting physical comfort, wanting, you know, material comfort, not much thought of others, you know, then what will happen is you'll just have this, I think you'll just have this kind of, you'll die and you'll just see all this and you'll feel that it hasn't done you any benefit. You know, I think that's what will happen. There's no benefit come from those. Whereas I feel that if, you know, the more we open up our goodness, the more we study and practice the Dharma, the Lam Rim, you know, develop our heart in goodness, develop our mind if we can in bodhicitta, it's like that much meaningful our death is going to be, that much more peaceful. So it's, I think that's what, you know, Guru Rinpoche is saying. That's what His Holiness says. His Holiness always says, you know, he can do all these complex meditation. He doesn't, well, he says that he does what we're going to go into, the death process every day. But what he always says, the most important mind is bodhicitta at the death time. Trying to generate this mind of thinking about others, making, you know, even the death time may become meaningful for others. There's actually a book that Lama Zopa Rinpoche has. This is where because we're not going to all run off, do these death meditations, and all of a sudden we're going to be great meditators and go to the mountains. We're not all going to become ordained. We're not all going to go to the mountains and do retreat. So what Lama Zopa Rinpoche was really a master of doing was trying to make all the actions that we do in the day as meaningful as possible. We have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to, you know, we go to work. We're not all going to give up our work, but making those meaningful. How do we make those meaningful? And so Rinpoche came up with all, you know, there's a book called Making Life Meaningful. It's a free book if you want to write it down. Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive. It's not very big, but it's like Rinpoche helping us to make our actions like these meaningful. You know, the normal actions that we have to do, because we're not going to go into the mountains, right? We have, and life's just different these days. So that we feel inspired that we're making our life as we have it meaningful moment to moment. And the most way is having this heart, this good-hearted bodhicitta, having this wish with all our actions in our life, in our career and everything to make it beneficial for others, you know. And in the meantime, studying and practicing the Lam Rim so we can also learn to meditate and really ingest these teachings on, you know, karma and emptiness and, you know, do some purification so we can get our mind prepared to liberate itself, you know, for samsara altogether. So it's not like, you know, but if we live our life just for this life without the thought of death, without the idea of continuity consciousness, taking care of our future lives, then this is what can result, you know, that at the death time we feel like we went away empty-handed from this life. You know, I think that feeling will come up. We have 3 chats. Let me just have a quick look at the chats. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bay, for doing that, yeah. Oh, someone else mentioned meaningless. Yes, also Damien, yeah, it doesn't have, well, it can have an intention, but the intention is just, you know, want and comfort this life. And of course, we still do those things, I think, all of us. I mean, I'm many years in the practice and I'm not always on top of making every moment meaningful. But the best, that's why in the morning time, it's so important to create the intention of, you know, bodhicitta, you know, or thinking about just a small quote on death and impermanence, so we don't cling to the day. And then we think about bodhicitta, good-heartedness, whatever inspires us to have a good day, you know, because that will flavour the rest of the day, our morning intention, you know. And if we can do a little bit in the afternoon, even a couple of minutes, and then in the evening again before we go to bed, just keeping our mind as good as possible. And not allowing too much of the delusion to take over through the day, you know, trying to keep the mind in check. So it's right in a way, no intention, but it's also more, we often just we're just naturally motivated to want and comfort this life, wanting, you know, people to like us and reputation and not wanting hurt and, you know, these things, you know, that we need to kind of work on through our practice and meditation. So one of the best ways is having this motivation to want to be of service to others throughout the day and kind of nurturing our mind with goodness in the morning, you know, a morning meditation. But thank you, Damien, for sharing. So yeah, so as we say, yeah, we need to, so it's for sure we need to face death alone, you know. And so what we're really going into this now, you know, through these 9 sort of step meditation on death, that's one way of meditating on death, you know, to go through those 9 steps. That absolutely, even if you go through one of them in the morning, one of these 9 steps, one of the points, it reminds us of death. You know, we don't have to go through 9 every day. We can just pick a quote. We can look up the book that Rinpoche has on the Lam Rim, you know, the one that I've suggested, the 365 Days of Lam Rim, is excellent. Some of those short meditations on death every morning. Just take a minute to read through, just to remind ourselves, just to check in. Hey, I'm going to die sometime, you know, so what are you doing today, you know? What's the purpose of your day? Okay, I have to go to work, I have to do this, but I'm trying to make a good motivation for the day, you know, make your motivation meaningful and make a plan that in the midst of my life, I still want to practice and study the Lam Rim, the Dharma, because eventually I want to realize emptiness, you know, eventually I want to get out of samsara. As I want to develop these higher levels of happiness that my mind has the potential for, my consciousness has the potential for, these 3 levels of happiness. So again, just as this prayer, I wanted to just mention this. This is the 2 verses within the foundational good qualities. The middle 2, I think these are the 3rd and 4th verses that Lama Tsongkhapa reminds me. So also you could recite these 2 in the morning. You know, this body and life are changing like a water bubble. Remember how quickly the perish and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Right? So this is what happens. We bring our good stuff and not so good stuff with us. And again, that we go a little bit more into in karma module. So we take the seeds that we've planted in this life and carry them over to next life. So it's not to freak us out, it's just to be aware, it's to be really clear. This is the process, what's going on in my life, you know, this is how my life is operating, this is the nature of things. So when I found definite conviction in this, that conviction in what? That, you know, life is impermanent, and that, you know, as I study and think about karma more and more, whatever I'm creating is carrying over in my future lives. Please bless me to be conscientious and abandoning even the slightest collection of shortcomings and accomplishing all virtuous deeds. So again, we're not going to be able to do that right away. We still have our emotional stuff. We still have our delusions. But, you know, these prayers, when we recite them, they have a power because they were written by holy beings. So when we read and reflect them, they do impact our mind, you know, and especially through familiarity. They have a, you know, impact our mind and cause us to kind of create some momentum gradually for us to be able to practice in that way. To gradually, I think there was one There's just some stories in the Lam Rim about practitioners in the old days, you know, they didn't have calculators or computers or anything. So, you know, they used to use stones to count, yeah. So there's practitioners who, you know, they'd spend many years practicing, and in the beginning of their years of practice, one of them had like black stones and white stones. So the black stones were throughout the day, the stuff that he did wasn't so good, you know, so he had a pile of black and maybe not so many white. But he recognised over the time he was retreat or over the years, you know, the black stones were getting less, and every day, and then he would have more and more white stones. So it's kind of like that, you know, gradually we build up our accumulation of white karma, you know, good white is like the goodness, you know, that we bring, and we rejoice in that. Every time we move one black stone away and we bring one extra white stone. This is why we have these practices of purification as well. I know some of you have joined. I know Venerable Katie does them for Land of Medicine Buddha, the Vajrasattva practice, for purifying. So those daily practices allow us to sort of counter black, counter white, and chip away at the black, you know, and create more white, you know, and purify the black, you know, because that much more we purify our negative karma, the power of our ability to create good karma increases. You know, it's like we clean away the dirt and then things get clean in our mind, and then the ability for us to create more goodness, be more patient, be more kind, that increases because we're not burdened by the heavy stuff, you know, that becomes less and less powerful in our mind. So purification's like, I feel like my life's been purification. I can't emphasize enough how important purification is, you know, it's so important. So I know some of you are doing it already, and I rejoice. And for those of you who aren't, I would really, you know, hopefully as we go through the karma module, we'll talk more about purification as well. I'll hope some of you get inspired, because it's the purifying and collecting merit is really strengthens our minds, so we're able to develop and understand these Lam Rim topics in our heart and minds more deeply. So just before we go into, I've been meaning to do this every week, but it's difficult. Let me just see, I see in the chat, is there something? Okay, yeah, thank you, Bea, for being on top of that. So what's quite inspiring before we go into the death process, I can't get this to close. There we go. So just before we go into the death process, there's these 3 levels. Some of you, again, will have read about this or heard about it in the past, know about it already. It's a bit like the 3 levels of spiritual practitioners, how they pass away. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche and His Holiness, they all talk about these 3 different levels. So the most accomplished practitioners die with great joy. It's like going on holiday, and it literally is like that. You know, there's no fear, there's no hesitation. They feel totally prepared, and they're actually looking forward to going through the death process. So for that, I'm like, wow. I just rejoice, because I'm not there yet. Because I've spent a life in meditation and remembering death and impermanence, and creating merit, as I said, purifying and not creating any more. And again, as it says here, the purest Dharmic practitioners, it's like going back home. They're literally like, they're just going back to this happy place that they're so familiar with. There's no unfamiliarity. They know where they're going. It's like going on holiday, or Rinpoche would say going on a picnic. They look forward to death, and their minds dies very easily, you know. Even if they're surrounded by, like at the time of the Buddha, he was surrounded by all his disciples. They were weeping, they couldn't believe it, you know. I mean, it's a huge loss to lose the Buddha, you know, to lose your spiritual teacher if you've had a strong connection with one teacher. But it doesn't affect their mind at that level, you know. They're already prepared, they know where they're going, they've let go of all attachments, and they've made their life like most meaningful, and they have complete control at the death time. I'll just go back to the previous slide. I put Lama Yeshe in here because Rinpoche used to say of Lama Yeshe that Lama Yeshe was on top of death. I really like that expression. You know, when we're on top of something, we've got it sorted, we know how to deal with it. So Rinpoche used to use that expression for Lama Yeshe, that he was on top of death. And that means they have complete control of the death process at the time of death, you know. They're able to to navigate the whole process that we're going to look at, and also to bring their mind to a future rebirth where they can direct their mind themselves to a future rebirth. So they have that level of control. So for us, it's like we could just spend all day rejoicing in that. That's like unbelievable, that level of accomplishment. So here again, I have an image of the Laudo Lama, who was the incarnation, the previous life of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. He spent the last 25 years of his life. He wasn't a monk, he was a lay practitioner, which means he had family actually. And for most of his life, apart from going to lots of teachings, and he also, he had family and he had to take care of his family and take care of their welfare. But when he reached his mid-50s, he felt able to then go into retreat. So I'm not going to go into the deep story of that now, but when he passed away, he had one main disciple, and when he passed, at his time of passing, his disciple was in the room, in the cave, so he meditated in the Himalayas. Laudo's a place that you can go to now. It's a retreat centre up in the Himalayas. I've been a couple of times. I did lead a slideshow of my pilgrimage there last year for Ocean of Compassion. So it's a place you can go now and you can sit and spend time in the cave that Rinpoche in his previous life as a Laudo Lama meditated in. It's very powerful. And so anyway, when the Laudo Lama was passing away, he actually, he had his disciple with him. His disciple had no idea what was happening. There were some signs, but again, for ordinary beings, we wouldn't know until maybe afterwards. But basically, he just he wasn't particularly sick. He was in his 80s, but he wasn't like under the control of some major sickness at that time. But he called his disciple in and he asked that he had his daughter, but he's asked for his daughter not to be in the room. The disciple didn't know what was happening, but he just expressed how, his kind of, how he was so happy with his disciple and that they had, had some meaningful time together to practice the Dharma. And he asked the disciple to sort of say what the signs were of the moon outside and different signs and some things he heard, some auspicious signs. And he sat up and he lay down purposely on his side in meditation, right side you can lay down on, and expressed ah 3 times. Ah is the kind of subtle sound, most subtle sound of emptiness. He expressed that 3 times and passed away. And he had just before that just eaten some, his disciple just offered him dinner, his soup, so he said he didn't need that, but for the sake of his disciple and to pray for the disciple to have what he needs, he would, enjoy the soup. But again, the disciple had no idea what was going on. And then he expressed a few words and then said, 3 times and lay on his right side and passed away. So the disciple was completely like blown away. And he was in that meditative state for about 3-4 days. So that's kind, and there's many stories like that of these lamas who have, they know exactly when they're going to pass. They decide themselves, so it's incredible. I mean, some of us will have read about that. So it's just something to really rejoice in, and read about because it's so inspiring. So that's the highest level. Middle level are those who die happily without worry, even if they might not look forward to it, but they've got a lot of ease going on in their mind, and they have some sense of what they're going to be doing at the death time. They know they've got some ability to be able to meditate and practice in the death time. So that's the kind of, you could say, like, in terms of grades, the higher one, like Laudo Lama, Lama Yeshe, all these great beings, they're A students, You could say these intermediate level ones are B students. And you could say that the C students who still, they've not failed, the lowest level practitioners are those who have still, as I said, create a lot of goodness in their life. They still feel at peace, They still feel at peace about the death time. They know that they'll die without fear or regret. They feel like at their level they've done sort of what they've done. They can, So this is kind of, the three. The 3 levels. So hopefully we're going to be able to fit into one of them, yeah? Where are we now and where do we want to be, when the time comes? Sorry, is there okay. So that's yeah, that's kind of what we want to try and, you know, we've got time, you know, hopefully, we don't know, but hopefully we've got time to try and fit into one of those categories. So I wanted to read something from His Holiness the Dalai Lama just as we move into the death process. This is a beautiful meditation picture, His Holiness meditating, and His Holiness says that he meditates, you know, these teachings on how what the death process looks like, the appearances, the dissolutions that our consciousness goes through. These actually come from the tantric teachings. And normally, you know, in the past, you wouldn't get access to these teachings unless you had initiation. But I actually think it was Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche felt for us Westerners who, you know, we don't know much about that level of death, you know. And you know, in Western culture, often we don't even think about death till quite late on in life, you know, depending again on our spiritual upbringing. So they started to, you know, very early on in the days at Kopan, they made these teachings available to us. So because we need to understand, you know, it develops our faith in the Dharma as well. And we have quite scientific minds, I think, as well, some of us, and we're well educated. So they felt like there was no need to wait till we had empowerment. So they make them available for us now. So we're very fortunate, you know, to be able to get a sense of the death process and even meditate on it now if we can. So I just want to read out what His Holiness says about death and the dissolution process. Embarking on a spiritual practice that is measured in lifetimes and eons gives you a different perspective on death. In the context of our existence through many successive lives, death is something like changing your clothes. When your clothes become old and worn out, you change them for new ones. This affects your attitude toward death. It gives rise to a clearer realization that death is part of life. When we are dying, other people can remind us to generate positive states of mind up to the point at which the gross level of consciousness dissolves. But once we have entered the state of subtle consciousness, only the force of previous predispositions can help. At that point, it is very difficult for anyone else to remind us about virtuous practice. Therefore, it is important to develop an awareness of death and to become familiar with the ways to cope with the dissolution of the mind right from the time of our youth. We can do this by rehearsing it through visualization. Then instead of being afraid of death, we may feel a sense of excitement about it. We may feel that having made preparations for so many years, we should be able to meet the challenge of death effectively. So, I mean, it's a very beautiful way how His Holiness expresses things, you know. I mean, it's just, no one else can say like that. So I just wanted to share that as we move into this kind of death process. So death occurs when the consciousness, the mind, separates from the body. Even when the breath has stopped, that is what's called the outer breath, or the brain doesn't function or the heart doesn't beat. The person is not dead until the mind, the consciousness, leaves the body. So I know many of us are quite familiar with that now. Some of us, that might be quite new. But so for ordinary death, you know, in the Western view of death, it's only when the outer breath stops. You know, that's what they label death, clinical death, when this outer breath stops, when the brain, the heart doesn't function anymore. But in the Buddhist view, we're only part of the way there. You know, we still have a whole inner process, this death process of the death dissolution, the absorption of the consciousness, that still needs to happen. So this is what we're looking into now, that inner process that goes on. As I say, it's the inner breath, and for this to stop, the consciousness to leave the body can take anywhere from a few seconds, which generally happens when people have sudden death, you know, die in car accidents, you know, fall down suddenly, or that you can leave the body quite quickly. But it can take, even for us ordinary beings, can take up to 3 days for the outer, once the ordinary breath ceased, outer breath, for us to actually, the consciousness to leave the body, for the inner breath to still go through its level of dissolution, to be able to leave the body, the mind and consciousness. So again, this is all very clearly explained in How to Enjoy Death by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So what we have a gross body, that's the one that we're aware of. We have a subtle body, you know. So we have, and again, that came up, we've seen the diagram, I'm going to show it again. When we did the how to meditate module, we have a subtle body that's made up of channels, winds and drops. And that's kind of what comes into play more as they would go through the death dissolution, what's going on with the subtle body. And then we have an extremely subtle body, which is called the subtle, all it is a subtle wind. Then we have consciousness. So the subtle body and anyway, sorry, let's start with the gross. So we have levels of consciousness. Gross consciousness is sense consciousnesses. So we have 6 sense consciousnesses: sense of touch, taste, sight, sound, tactile. So we have these sense consciousnesses, and then we have subtle consciousness, various conceptual states of mind called 80 superstitions, as well as the minds of white appearance, red increase, and dark near attainment. And we have extremely subtle consciousness. And that's the mind of clear light. That's the one that abides in our heart chakra all the time. Most subtle consciousness is the one, only that one goes for life to life. And that's where we carry all the seeds and karma and imprints. That's the one, along with the subtle wind. So again, these are the teachings from Tantra. You know, we have this subtle wind in mind. And that's the basis of everything, actually. It's the basis of all our experiences. But there's different levels of wind in mind, you know. So it's only the most subtle one that goes for life to life. But it still carries with it all our experiences, all our karmic imprints from this and past lives. Carries within that everything. So that's the one that's, that's the one we want to get back to at the death time, this most subtle consciousness. So here's an image of our subtle body. So again, we have the wind energies of the subtle body. So within the subtle body, we have again, gross body here is the outer one, and the subtle body is just images of the chakras. You know, we have the channels, the 3 main channels of the body. There are actually 72,000 channels in the body. We can't picture them all here. It's impossible to draw here. I guess the AI eventually will be able to make an image with all the 72,000 channels. But the main ones we're concerned with, even at the death time, are like how the dissolution happens within these 3 channels, the dissolutions of the gross winds and minds going into these central channels. I couldn't get an image of the, so we have the, 3 channels, the central and the 2 outer channels. We have these chakras, the crown, the throat, the heart, and the navel, and also we have a sex chakra as well. So again, the winds and mind travel through these at the death time. And then these seeds, all they are is like, we have this very subtle consciousness. I couldn't get a picture of one. But in the heart chakra, we have this very, very subtle, it's like the size of a bean or a small seed. And it's a white and red color because it carries these drops of white and red for the bodhicitta from or the sperm for the father, and the womb or the sort of egg and the blood for the mother. And these abide in mainly the heart chakra, but also the crown and the navel chakra. And these all dissolve as well at the time of death, and they affect what appears to our mind, you know, these, because we have these different appearances that come because these substances abide in the subtle body. On the left here is just a diagram of what the chakras look like. They have petals. So again, just going through this very, very briefly. These are, quite detailed really, but just giving you some sense of the visual.
Ladan has a question.
Okay, yes. Dana? Nadan, yep.
Yes, I had a problem with unmute myself.
Okay.
If we do shamatha,
Yes.
there is are we going to touch this very subtle wind, as you say, like a pristine awareness, if we do like the stages of shamatha?
If you get to the 9th stage, you can develop clairvoyances. Actually, that I'm not. You wouldn't get into the most subtle mind of clear light. No. You would get into definitely more subtle levels of consciousness. How deeply in you get, I'm not sure. But I do know that when you fully develop shamatha, your whole body and mind can experience bliss, you know.
Yeah.
You can develop levels of clairvoyance. You definitely get a sight, a type of, you know, spiritual sight that you haven't seen before. But I believe it doesn't bring you right into the mind of clear light. I mean, you actually need tantric praxis to access the most subtle mind of clear light this life.
Oh, okay.
But again, double check that with other teachers, because I'm more familiar with the tantric teachings in the sutra level of shamatha.
Sure.
Not that I'm over familiar, but I'm more familiar with that. So I
Thank
haven't
you.
studied the sutra samatha so much, you know. So but I think, yeah, I do know that you can develop clairvoyances. But you actually do still need tantric praxis to develop deeper levels of realization, even with the sutra, shamatha, and vipassana. At some point, you need to move on to tantra. Does that help a little bit?
Oh, very much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. So again, for doing these praxis, to do them, to really, you know, they'll come to life more, these praxis, when we maybe are able to do some of these, like, I mean, this book called Will Amalesha, The Bliss of Inner Fire, goes through in more detail these different levels of consciousnesses. The praxis, the 6 yogas in Europa, is a practice where one is moving into these more subtle praxis and working with subtle wind and consciousnesses, working on the chakras, trying to bring the wind energy into this central body. But really, to be able to do these as well, we'll have to have a good experience of the Lam Rim. We have to have an experience of renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. And then on top, with the praxis of the subtle body, 6 yogas in Europa, or other praxis, all of these come together really nicely and you get a very rounded practice. So as I say, though, at this level, we're still very fortunate to be able to, you know, get some understanding and still see if we can meditate a little bit on these dissolution processes. So so what the death process looks like, when the actual process of dying begins, we pass through 8 phases, and the first 4 involve the collapse of the 4 elements, and the last is the collapse of consciousness into more subtle levels of consciousness. So there's, again, just skimming through, this is not so important. I just want to get into the process itself, but just giving you this information. It is all in the reading materials. The 25 factors in the dissolution are the 4 elements. So we're made up of elements and consciousness, and we're made up of like these 25 factors that all absorb or kind of die at the death time, you know. So including in that is the 4 elements, the 5 aggregates, you know, the grosser level, we have subtle and grosser levels of aggregates. So the grosser level of our aggregates also absorb at the death time into this more everything's absorbing eventually, and we just go into this subtle level of consciousness. So these are all the things that start to absorb at different times and places in the death process. What we want to aim towards becoming a Buddha is developing what we call the resultant wisdoms, these 5 wisdoms. Right now we have them, but they're basic, mirror-like wisdom. And these are also quite interesting to study a little bit, the 5 wisdoms. They're also related to the 5 Buddhas, the 5 Buddha families. Each certain Buddha embodies specifically one of these wisdoms. So right now we have them all, but we have them on a basic level. So these also absorb into the subtle consciousness. Our 6 sense powers all absorb as well. And our sense of sense objects, the 5 inner sense objects also absorb, you know, into this, all through this process of dying. The first 4 stages of the process involve the 4 of the 5 aggregates. So the first 4 stages, these grosser ones are the ones that dissolve there, you know. The last 3 components are at the stage when we're going into subtle consciousness. So this is the first, again, you don't really need to remember these. It's just, I'm just enumerating them for you here anyway, but they're not so important. What we want to really focus on here is what's appearing, you know, what does it look like when we're dying? What does it feel like? So the last four is when, again, the last four is when the final three, the aggregate consciousness, the mental sense, and the basic wisdom, realizing the nature of phenomena. These are the last four to dissolve and absorb into the clear light, the most subtle mind. So in general, just what happens is the grosser elements, aggregates and the wisdoms and the elements, the grosser ones dissolve more and more into the subtler ones. So as the four elements dissolve one by one, so what first starts to happen when the death process is upon us, it's actually upon us, it's happening. So the first appearance that starts to happen when we know, now, everything's starting to shut down in the body. So the first thing that appears to the mind is an inner vision, like shimmering. Again, we're not going to have this desert light, but it's the only picture I could find that gives a sense, the idea of like water shimmering in the heat. It's like a mirage. So we start to feel get a vision in our mind of a mirage, and what outwardly starts to happen is the other signs is we start to feel like it's kind of like a pressing on us, the loss of control of our limbs, our body becomes thinner. We're losing control of the sort of form aggregate, so the body's thinning, we can't move our limbs anymore. And one of the main signs that happens, the first sign that's happening, and this is the main sign that Rinpoche says that death is upon us, is that we're no longer able to open and close our eyes because the eye sense base dissolves. So it's like when that's happening, when you imagine you're lying on your deathbed, and it's like you feel this heaviness in the body and you're not able to move your limbs, you have no control anymore over the body. But then if you discover that you can't open and close your eyes, you've also lost a sense of that, then you know at that time the death process is upon you. This is the main sign that the death process is happening. And that's accompanied by the vision of this mirage. So all that pervades your mind is a sort of a vision of this mirage happening in the space before you. So again, if we've done these meditations, we sit in the morning, we go through, okay, the first thing that happens is, imagine I'm dying, I'm on my deathbed. First thing happens, I have no control over my limbs. I can feel the body's kind of thinning and waning, and I'm not able to open and close my eyes. And I start to see this appearance of a mirage. That's the start of the death process. Then that starts to disappear, disappear, and the next vision that starts to come is as the dissolution of the water element comes, and it dissolves before, why we got a vision of the mirage is because the earth element in our body is absorbing into the water element, and due to that, mainly because of that absorption of the elements, we get this appearance of a mirage. The next element in the body that starts to absorb or dissolve is the water element. And that absorbs into the fire element. So what appears to our mind is it's like incense in a room, incense smoke in a room, or a room filled with smoke. We just get this appearance of smoke. And then the body starts to dry up. We no longer feel liquid in our mouth. So it's like all the element of water, liquid in our body is drying up. And what also happens in terms of the senses is that we can no longer hear sounds. So, or if we do, they're extremely, extremely distant. And we also no longer feel a sense of pain or pleasure. So, because the aggregate of feeling is also dissolving. So again, we try to, imagine, again, this is kind of what you try and do as the meditation, So during the practice day, we will go through this meditation of imagining that, I'm not going to hold it and scare you away, but it's a really great meditation to do, imagining on your deathbed, and then just going through these appearances and reminding yourself, okay, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And if we just do this on occasion, it's making us familiar with what's ahead of us. It's all the signposts. So now the next So that appearance of the room filled with smoke, that slowly starts to absorb. And I mean, this process it's different for different people, how long it takes. Sometimes people it's like on occasion, people will get other visions before. They may not get the mirage one first, they might get another vision first, but generally speaking, most of the time, this is the order that the visions go. But it's not exactly the same for everyone. But it's mostly, what I've read, it's like mostly this is the case, you know. So this is how the different, especially with the absorption of the elements, how they absorb in this order. And they're the main ones that are creating these visions. So we had the fire absorbing into the water, absorbing into the fire, we're having the smoke, so that slowly starts to disappear, and then what comes in place of that is like an image of fireflies, a dark room with fireflies, or like it's almost like a fire with sparks, all this, but you don't see the fire, you just see the sparks from a fire in the room. And this is due to the dissolution of the fire into the wind element. Here, the aggregate of discrimination dissolves and we no longer recognise friends. The body heat ceases and we're no longer at that point able to digest food. All the the heat is slowly, not all the heat, but the grosser part of the heat element is absorbing. So from the level of gross body, we're not able to absorb, we wouldn't be able to digest food anymore. And also the nose sense base dissolves and breathing becomes harder. So our breathing outward is stronger and longer than our breathing inward. And most people, I think, who have been around people who pass away, I've certainly been around someone like that, that's a very strong sign as well that they're going to pass away quite soon when the breathing starts to go, you know, much more outward and not able to, you're not able to breathe in very much. The outer breath's much longer. So that's a sign that the person's very close to death, or yourself. Then the last phase, as just before the outer breath ceases, you know, just before, in Western view, we're clinically dead. The last phase is when the mind, we have this, you know, this image of the fireflies that absorbs, and then what appears is a bit like a candle flame. It flickers and then it becomes steady, but there's a sort of blue-red light around that flame, and that's maybe even more prominent than the flame itself. So there's a sort of idea of flame, but it's the blue-red light and it's kind of somewhere in the distance. But again, that's the only vision you see. And when that comes, then that's when we're breathing our last breath. Here, the aggregate of compositional factors dissolves, and then there's all worldly activities cease. We're no longer able to move the body. The wind element dissolves, breathing stops. And again, this is where we would be, you know, diagnosed, we would say we were clinically dead, you know, but this is just the grosser consciousness having absorbed into the subtle consciousness. Because we still have 3 of the 25 components to dissolve. We still have to dissolve consciousness, the wisdom of Dharma Dhatu, and the mental sense base. So there's still 3 other factors going in internally that still need to absorb into this mind of clear light. So again, this is when we're getting into the subtle, very subtle body, subtle meditation, subtle consciousness. So at this point, we have to, the points before, even as His Holiness said, you know, there are times when we're dying that other people can help, they can read, you know, it's not that we don't have people around us. If we have people that are supporting us through the death process, that are not clingy or emotional or attached, you know, if we're able to support people in that way, do prayers, do everything we can, it's like helping them to go somewhere, you know. It's like, you know, we want to help them to get through this process the best we can. So we can, you know, we can certainly do that as Dharma friends, you know. So that's good to do. It's when people are clinging or, you know, crying or causing us distress, that's the kind that we don't want to have someone like, you know, those kind of people around us, you know. We want it, but definitely, you know, Dharma friends, those who can support, those who accept the process, know what prayers you want done, that's wonderful to have them there, you know. So, but at the point where we get to, you know, when the breathing stopped, most of that process we're on our own now, you know. The others, we can still, I mean, Lama Zopa Rinpoche still would have us recite prayers around people who have, who have already stopped breathing. Rinpoche would say there's still an element where they can still hear. But again, at this point, this is really where we need to be on our game, you know. This point now, when we go into subtle consciousness, is where we need, you know, we want to have as much awareness or ability, or, you know, at least have some preparation for that process. When the wind or the energy in which the various levels of consciousness ride become very weak and dissolve more and more fully into consciousness, subtler and subtler levels of mind manifest. So now we're going into, so we're at this point where we've, you know, the breathing stopped and we've seen the flickering sort of blue-red candle flame. Then that starts to absorb, and what appears to us, just only appear in the consciousness, is like, you know, when there's a fresh snow in the autumn and the sky is like, it's because everything's going to got this sky-like appearance, but different colours appear. So the first appearance that comes is the vision of white, the vision of white, or the white appearance. And it's similar to like when the sky is pervaded with white after there's been a fresh small fall of snow. So when we're meditating, what we'd want to be thinking is, oh, here comes. It's almost like we know, if we're trained in this, like meditators, they'll be saying, they're actually at a point where every time an appearance comes, they know what the next appearance is going to be. They're ready for that. And they're also meditating on emptiness at the same time, the emptiness of that appearance. Right now, we're just going into what the appearances are, but they have they're doing other things at the same time as well. So when the vision of white light comes, they know at that time, okay, breathing stopped. I'm in here into a subtle level of consciousness. The first appearance is white light. And what they do with that is they meditate on the emptiness of that. This is me. It's empty. It's not my most subtle nature. They know that there's still 2 more appearances to go before the most subtle mind of clear light. So this is what we call the mind of white appearance. And what they do is they meditate on that and remember where they are in the process and where they're going next. Then a meditator would say, after the white appearance comes the red increase. So they meditate on the white appearance. Then slowly what's to manifest is the red appearance. And again, this happens, I'm not going to have time to explain it here, but you can read it in the book. This happens because the winds and mind are absorbing into the central channel, and that more central psychic channel, and they're passing through points in the chakras that are causing the red and white appearance to come. And again, through studying something like 6 yogas in a row, or even more just this death process, you'll okay, my mind's entered here, I'm going through these chakras, the subtle consciousness is absorbed into this one or that one. You're very familiar with, where your mind's traveling and what's appearing because you've got to that place in your meditation. So you'll have the white appearance, then the next one's going to be the mind of red increase, which is a bit like a copper autumn sky. That's kind of how they explain it. And again, we're still in the subtle level of consciousness. We haven't reached the very subtle level yet. So again, they know this is happening and they know what the next appearance is. So they meditate on the emptiness of this and they know what the next appearance is going to be. And the next appearance is the mind of black near attainment. So they know when they've reached this. And again, this is a mind of like a sky or a dark room, or the dark appearance of a sky, like it's totally black, but it's not pitch black. It's still spacious. It's still vast. It's still light. There's a lightness, but it's a black appearance, like a vision of darkness in the clear sky. So for meditators, they know then that this is the last appearance on the subtle level of consciousness, and the next appearance is the mind of clear light. This is the picnic they're going to. This is the place they called home. This is the place they're most familiar, and the final destination. And it's the mind of very subtle consciousness, a clear light. And this is what they've been waiting for, because actually, even according to Tantra, to access this mind in the waking time, it's not easy. It's very difficult to get to this most subtle mind of consciousness. So many meditators can maybe reach some of the more subtle minds, like the black appearance, the white, black near attainment, white appearance. They may be able to access that in their meditation, but it's not easy to access this most subtle mind of consciousness. And even in meditation, and without going through and actually into death, it's very difficult to get to this space. So they train their mind in the other appearances so that they know when I will go through them, then I'm going to reach the most subtle mind of consciousness. And at that time, that's where the real meditation on emptiness happens. And that's where great meditators either realize emptiness, deepen their experience of emptiness, and they can achieve enlightenment in that state. There's many different levels of realizations and ability you can achieve in meditating in this most subtle mind of clear light. So it's kind of like the cherry on the top of the cake, for meditators. That's where they want to go. That's where they want to do the real meditation on emptiness. Because the mind's at its most subtle place. It's also experiencing bliss. So it's actually the easiest way to recognize the nature of mind in that place. So for yogis, just to finish, for great yogis, it's like lucid dreaming. So for great yogis, many of them can't reach at that level of consciousness in this life, but they can do it in the dream state because they can access subtle consciousnesses in the dream state. So when they can do it in the dream state, then they have a strong confidence that at the death time, they're going to be able to, have that lucidity of meditation and be able to meditate on the clear light and gain realizations at that time. So for them, they're very present and fully in control. For those of us who haven't done this, familiarise ourselves with that, we won't be able to necessarily recognise. We may stay in it for a day or two, but we may not really be in full awareness of what's going on. His Holiness Ling Rinpoche in his previous life meditated for 13 days in that state. Some lamas, some great yogis stay in it for months, So, amazing. I know we're at 8:29 now. Any question with that? Any comment? Does anyone, I wondered if, so just let me get to the chat. Is there a very lovely book on how great beings die? Graceful Exits. Okay, someone is sharing a book called Graceful Exits by Shushila Blackman. If anyone wants to write that down. And there are quite a lot of books on, life stories of great masters, how they passed away. But this is just giving you a rundown of what they're actually doing, which is amazing. This is what they're meditating on, and it's possible we can develop that level of meditation. It's a lot about familiarity.
So I have a question about
Yes.
lucid dreaming and the process of death. I have a book. I didn't start it yet. I'm not very proud of that. It's His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Mm-hmm.
And the title is Dreaming and Dying. Dreaming something after I'm dying.
Yes.
So I will read it. I think it will explain to me something about like the dream state and the death stages. I wonder if it's like the when you are sleeping, is it the same, like the sensation in your body is the same as if you are going through the stages of?
So yeah, Ladan, next week, I didn't have time this week, but next week I'll go through these processes we go through in other activity days, and like dreaming is when we go to sleep, we actually go through that process. when there's certain times in our life like sneezing, and I'll mention them next week, but there's other times when we go through them, but that's why meditators they often start with like trying to have an awareness of these processes when we're going to sleep, because if you can be aware of that process when you're sleeping, then you know that you're going to be able to bring it into the death time. You have more confidence. But we do, when we go off to sleep, we do actually go through a sort of mini cycle of that. We don't go into the deepest level of consciousness, but we do go into a cycle of more subtle consciousness. So we go through these states in a sort of very quicker way, and we also go through them in a reverse order when we come out of sleep. So I didn't have time to cover it this week, but next week I want to cover when there's other times when we can sort of
Great.
see if we can get
Thank you.
awareness. Also fainting, when we faint. I have one nun friend that when she was at a teaching with His Holiness, she fainted and she went into the clear, she went into the white, I think she experienced the white appearance. Not the most subtle clear light, but she was able to, she was aware that she went into a level of the white appearance, a subtle level of consciousness around His Holiness.
Wow.
Everybody was worried, but I think it was some sort of blessing, you know.
Yeah, bless
Because
you
she
for
sort of
that.
fainted. They're like, oh my God. Because, you know, these strange things can happen around lamas. They look strange, but often it's like a blessing, you know. So she went into some sort of, and then later His Holiness came up to her and grabbed her hand or something, you know. So she kind of
Oh.
knew it was a positive
Yeah,
sign, you
experience.
know.
Yeah.
So
Thank
and
you.
you know, I
Okay.
wanted to ask, I know we're just running late, but you know, some of us might have experienced these already in our meditations or at sleep time, or you know, if we've had some sudden accident, or you know, I mean, we can go into these levels of mind and be quite aware. Some of us have more experience than others. So maybe we'll start next week by asking, think about it. Think about if any of those feel familiar, or if you know about anyone who might have experienced some of them, or who meditate on them and you're quite familiar with them. I'd love to know. Maybe we can start with that next week, because next week we'll be finishing off that and then going into how we can help people at the death time, you know, some practical things we can do for ourselves and then for others, along with the 5 powers that are that we try to practice in our life, so that we are prepared for the death time. I mean, there's different ways we can prepare our mind for the death time, and some of them are going to resonate more with us than others, and some of them you can sort of intermingle. They're not really separate from each other. They just sound like that because you teach them separately, but they all start to come together over time, as the Lam Rim does as well. So they're not really separate, but you know, we often have to teach it separately, and then it all sort of starts to merge together at some point, you know.
I have another question. It's for Bay.
Yes.
I paid for the mudra, and I don't remember the name of the session.
Bay's not you'd have to contact Vajrapani for that.
I think I did it, but no, it's not. Yeah, it's not Land of Medicine Buddha. It's another. Yeah, but I didn't receive anything. Okay, thank you.
It's through Vajrapani Institute.
Yeah, I mixed up. Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
yeah. But yeah, please get in touch again then, you know. And if you're having a problem, just get in touch with me if something happens, you know, and Bay's got my email. I think you have it as well. So if you're not able to connect, just let me know as well. Anyway, sorry we went over a little bit, but let's just I just wanted to get in those details of the death process. I mean, it is fascinating, and I just always find it, I love going through it, you know. So and we always make these aspirations to be able to recognize some of it. And I mean, the main point again for recognizing these states is so we can meditate in emptiness. We want to use these subtle minds for meditators. And again, when we move into the emptiness no module, we'll get, you know, some of us know some about emptiness already, maybe know a little bit how to meditate on it. But for tantric practitioners, especially in the, you know, in light of tantric practice, these subtle minds are the ways. Awakening these is how we're able to realize emptiness more quickly, using these subtle states of consciousness. Okay, thank you so much for your participation. And as I say, just keep carrying on with the readings and with some of the... Oh, Bay wanted me to ask, since you're here, just before you all disappear, Bay, but next week, I doubt it'll affect Joe, but next week is election. So we weren't sure We might
I'm
want
going
to
to
take a
try
vote.
for it not to affect me, but who knows?
Yeah, but but do we want to? I don't know how one of us. We're going to be quite involved with the election, I'm sure, and what's going on. So are we going to want to have a class, or do we want to wait for the week after to have the class? That's a question.
I would rather be here
Okay,
with
that's
all
one.
of you for that hour and a half, if that's okay with folks.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe we want to show, and I mean, it's totally fine if you want to have do you want to have a show of hands for those who would rather, who feel like they may want to, I'd like to have class, Tommy T. You can either put in the chat or raise your hand if you feel you would, if you want to do the class, raise your hand or put something in the chat. Stan, raised hand, 2 raised hands.
The election is a very samsaric activity, isn't it?
Well, I mean, much of it's up to our motivation, It's still
Ah.
motivation, and it does affect, the world. It does have an impact on sentient beings. So what we want to vote for, without being partisan, is whatever's most beneficial for the world, may that be the outcome. Whoever's elected, may it be the most beneficial and meaningful, creating less harm and more benefit, more compassion for the world. That's my prayer. I think that's all our prayer. So if you pray like that, I mean, even Rinpoche, when I was living at Rinpoche's house, of course, not the whole day, but there was, Rinpoche would want to know who won the election. There was one year when we were watching it, not for hours, but for a couple of hours or something to see how the results go, because it does impact the world. Sentient beings. It impacts how it's going to either benefit or not, potentially who wins. So it's good to pray for that, whatever may be the most beneficial, even though we may have our own idea of what that is, but sometimes it isn't the way we think it is, but I don't know. That's my prayer.
I'm just worried about when it's my time for death that I'm going to show up late.
Well, there's not much chance of that, Joe. I mean, death is with you. You can't really show up late.
There's no evidence to say that I will be there on time, really.
Well, your awareness might be a wee bit not on top of the process. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think that's likely.
I mean, we might not be there
even
in some
notice.
level. We want to be there as much as possible. But the idea is a lot of us are not quite there. We're definitely in it, but we're just, as Rimshi said about Lama, we're not on top of it. The worry is, we're not, I mean, most of us, it might be hard to be totally on top of it, but maybe we could get a C grade at least, If the Buddhas are watching, they would give us a C, So, whatever, so we want to be our best.
I try hard. I really want trying to be a Buddha, but I'm not. I don't rate my chances at the moment.
You can definitely be it, but we just step by step, bit by bit, it's there. It's we have to be far-sighted. It's far off there, but it doesn't mean it's not in our vision. We need to have it in our vision, If we don't even know that it's possible, it's not even in our vision, so, but it's possible for all of us. We have the seed, we have Buddha nature. But again, we have to nurture, cultivate, and all these things, but we all even the ant, that we see, as Shantideva said, I don't remember the verse, but he has this beautiful verse about if even the smallest ant who has Buddha nature can become a Buddha, then what about me? It's very beautiful the way he expresses it. It's like, I think it's when you get discouraged, it's to, if even that ant can, then shoot, I can, I mean, I'm a human being, I have intelligence, I can do these things, so that's kind of, we have to always encourage ourselves, not a false pride, but a sense of confidence.
I'm going to be more ant-like.
Well, that's good too. They're good in community. Anyway, let's just take a moment to dedicate all the positive energy. Sorry, we ran over a little bit. We're getting to the end, so I'm trying to fit everything in without it not being overwhelming. But let's just dedicate, especially that ourselves, all our friends, our family, everyone we're connected with, even not connected, we really wish that all beings, through having a good life, will live the best life with bodhicitta, with good heart, at least not harming others, and that they're able to, meet death in the best way, if not a C grade, if not an A grade, then ideally a B or a C for all of us, you know, to meet death with no fear, you know, with a peaceful mind. And to continue life after life, to develop our mind in the qualities of the two bodhicittas, you know, the ultimate bodhicitta, wisdom realizing emptiness, and conventional bodhicitta, the precious mind that wants to awaken so it can awaken all sentient beings, you know. So we'll dedicate for that, those two states, to develop bodhicitta and to develop wisdom realizing emptiness for ourselves and all sentient beings. Just to continue to do our best that we can on our spiritual path. Okay, thank you so much. And it looks like I'll see a good few of you next week. We got quite a few hands. And if not, I'm sure if you really feel pushed towards the election, I'm sure you'll catch up online. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, everyone.
Angie.
Thank you, Bay, and thank you, Jean, for trying to
Okay.
help me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Fenner and Angie.
Thank you, Joel. Good night, Joel,
Good
literally.
night. Good night.
Or good morning, maybe more.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah. Thank you. See you next week at some
See you next
point.
week. Yeah, yeah.